Hello, Realtors. Welcome back to GADcast, brought to you by the North Shore-Barrington Association of Realtors. My name is Joe Roth. I'm your local government affairs director here at NSBAR. This week, we're going to be taking a look at what's happening in the state legislature with one of our members from the State House lobbying team, Jim Clayton. So let's get started. Jim, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Joe, again.
All right, let's get started here. So you're in a bit of a new role now on the State House lobbying team. It's exciting developments. What's the new session looking like for you?
It's busy because these virtual hearings, these committee meetings, happen basically 8 to 5 every day. So we have ears and eyes on every committee so far, and it's just what's going to be called, what's not going to be called, what's a priority to certain caucuses, is kind of coming in later than normal as far as that updating that information. So now with committee deadline gone in the House, we'll probably get a little more of a clearer picture of the bills that we're going to really have to be concerned about.
And so that committee deadline, obviously, it's been a busy week, pretty active week, lots of bills moving. But one of those committees, we have a new committee in the legislature, a housing committee. Do you want to talk about the House's housing committee?
Yeah, well, Representative Guzzardi is the chairman and the vice chair is Representative Ramirez. If those names sound familiar, it's because about the last 3 years, Representative Guzzardi has put forward some version of a rent control bill. And Representative Ramirez was one of the sponsors of the COVID relief package for landlords and tenants that we also worked on. A lot of our language is included on and worked with Representative Ramirez on for not only lame duck, but then during lame duck it passed in the House but stalled in the Senate. But last week was recently passed on the House floor that could get some relief to our landlord members as the tenants as well. And it has a 13-8 split on Democrat to Republican on the committee. And it's to address affordable housing or different types of housing initiatives. And the most popular one right now, and the first one, almost the first one they addressed, is rent control. So we do have a realtor member, Sam Yingling, Representative Sam Yingling on that committee. So our interaction with the committee has been good so far. The conversations we've had have been very, very helpful. Obviously, with some of the news about rent control, you wouldn't think that, but we've gotten a lot farther with some of those legislators than we ever have before.
And let's jump into that a little bit. What is the status of this year's rent control? Are there any new wrinkles to this or?
No, so Representative Guzzardi originally introduced House Bill 116 when the 102nd General Assembly first began. And that's just to simply lift the ban of the 1997 Preemption Act that was signed by Governor Egger that the Illinois Realtors helped write. He later introduced an amendment that would do various things of empowering local governments on that, but since then he wanted to remove that amendment. It had a considerable amount of opposition. I believe over 1,300 witness slips were filed against that amendment to only about 200 proponents. So he wanted to go with the original bill, just lifting the ban and then open up the discussion for municipalities to have on how they would do their version of rent control. Obviously, that's not something that we're in favor of as well. But opposition went back and forth, and there was some lengthy discussion, debate. Ultimately, the House Bill 116 to lift the ban was passed in committee and placed on second reading, which will then go to the floor. We still have a lot of work to do on that. We expected that outcome. The legislative team, just the makeup of that housing committee and having a lot more progressive type membership towards it, we expected that, but we still have, like I said, working relationships with a lot of the members of that committee, including on both sides of the aisle. And I think most of it could have been considered passed to open up that conversation, but at the same time, we'll have our work cut out for us. And, I think that this being the first time that it passes through a committee, rent control, that being, it's a new area for us, and it's a new area for them. But at the same time, I trust in our membership and our numbers and our legislative team here to get the right outcome out of this.
Yeah, and rent control obviously a big issue for us, but it's by no means the only issue. And with the legislature not doing a whole lot last year, not really a lot of substantive issues moving forward out of the legislature last year. It appears like we're catching up on lost time. I read this morning that the House committees have approved more than 600 substantive bills to move forward. What's the status of the realtor agenda beyond rent control?
We were actually discussing that yesterday as a legislative team, and actually we're in a really good spot. As you mentioned earlier in the call, it's kind of a new role for me, but we do have Betsy Mitchell as a senior advisor that has joined our legislative team. Still have our vice president and fearless leader, Greg St. Alban, and Matt Rentschler, our legislative attorney. I mean, with all four of us together, we've really been able to, like I said, prioritize and kind of get that clear picture of what bills we really need to be concerned about. And after yesterday, looking back at it, we're in a pretty good spot. We have some bills that could still be introduced even though the committee deadline passed, but for the most part, we're dealing with environmental justice, clean energy, energy efficient type legislation, mandating new construction type legislation for energy related purposes, and a lot of vacant and blighted property legislation, lead service line replacement act. So there's a lot of areas that we're might have to tweak and definitely weigh in on. But as far as outright opposition or going to battle, there's only a few of those, rent control being one, that we're going to have that tough legislative battle with. The rest of them, I could see either if our amendments go well or tweaks go well, that we could see kind of stepping aside and watching those play out, but and not have so much defense to do as we usually do, because as you mentioned, a lot of bills are coming out, but at the same time, a lot are making sense as for the changes needed in some code that doesn't affect us. But the ones that do affect the real estate industry, we got a good grasp of right now. I think we're in a good spot with all of them. And I think the legislative team would agree that we're in better shape than it probably looks.
No, I mean, it sounds like you guys are definitely well ahead of the curve. And with the composition of the team, I think you guys are ready to take on just about anything. But we've got an interesting event coming up that I want you to talk a little bit about. Previous years, last year, obviously we couldn't do Capitol Conference, and this year, we can't gather in person, but that doesn't mean we can't, make our presence known. And so we've got a virtual lobby days coming up. Jim, can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, and like you mentioned, we didn't want to just do the same thing that we did last year with recording a legislative interview, editing it, asking the same questions over and over, and just hearing region-specific answers. We wanted to bring our members back to the legislator, but we knew that we couldn't do that in person. So what we kind of switched up in our gears, we switched up to is an initiative and a big idea that I think will blow away our members, of how we're going to bring our members to, I don't want to give too much away, how we're going to bring our membership to the leaders of Illinois. So we have the 4 highest ranking elected officials at the State House coming to do one-on-one interviews with our legislative team throughout April. And instead of a lobby day, since we can't do it virtually and have all of our members, the 800 that come and walk through the Capitol with our realtor folders and show that we have 800 to 1,000 members here in town, we'd like to do that, but in a different way. So beginning on April 12th, we'll have Speaker Welch for a live interview with Greg St. Alban. And then every corresponding Monday all the way till May 3rd, we will have President Don Harmon, House Minority Leader Jim Durkin, and Senate Minority Leader Dan McConkey. So like I said, the 4 biggest elected officials or our highest ranking elected officials in the State House will all be joining us for personal one-on-one interviews that our members are going to be able to watch live, as well as we have a lot of components happening through April as far as just updating our advocacy, different initiatives through advocacy that not only our members can display to elected officials, but they can feel pride in some of the reports that we're going to be handling to elected officials and how we're switching gears of how we give our advocacy components. So April is going to be a big month, and we're deeming it the advocacy month for a reason, because we want to show not only how advocacy is one of our biggest strengths, but how our members play a role in that, and our members are our most powerful tool. So Be on the lookout for April. I believe that Joe or NSBAR is going to be providing a link to register to that. We want to get that 800,000 members that we typically get on lobby day just all through April.
Absolutely. That sounds like a good time, and we will be providing our members the link. All they need to do is register and show up, and it sounds like it's going to be a good, informative event, and always a pleasure to flex our muscle a little bit in front of the leadership, because we have a very large audience here, a lot of realtors in the state that really drive the economy, are a big part of our economy in the state, and really a critical part of our communities.
Well, and I think that if you can see a positive lining in any part of COVID, which I know it's always difficult, but industry related and professionally, if you look at how essential real estate was, not just being deemed essential, but how essential real estate in the market it was to local economies, and how when other states around us weren't deemed essential and couldn't operate as is, how Illinois thrived, and how our industry thrived. And just looking at some of our numbers and some of the statistics, you can see based with any legislative district within Illinois, the real estate market thrived and the industry thrived. And it just shows how vital we really are to local economies.
Jim, I appreciate it. Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Make sure you turn into the GADcast. You've got, one of the best in the biz,
GADcast promo on GADcast. I like it.
I think that it would be a disservice to the Northern Illinois territory not to watch Joe Roth on a monthly basis. So tune in to GADcast, pay attention to your local issues, and be on alert for call for actions that our state legislative team is going to most definitely be sending out this session.
And we'll also throw in a promo. If you haven't signed up yet, please text the word realtors to 30644, so it's a little bit easier to respond to those calls for action. Simple text message. And we do a lot of those, don't we?
Yeah, and it takes about 2 minutes to respond to our call for action. I would imagine that a lot of texts will be going out by the end of April, early May.
All right, good times. Jim, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And that does it for this episode of GADcast. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to discuss, just email me. It's joe@nasbar.org. Next week is going to be our municipal elections. If you haven't done so yet, please make plans to vote in the coming election. Thanks, and be well.